Aloha mai kako. Welcome everyone to our World Interfaith Harmony Week event with the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation and the Interfaith Ohana of Hawaii. My name is Audrey Kitagawa. I'm the founder and president of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation. You can learn more about the Academy by going to the link placed in the chat box. The detailed bios of our panelists will also be placed in the chat box as I introduce them. I will be your moderator today with a sterling panel of Pacific Islanders and Indigenous people who will share the sacred values of their respective traditions. Our speakers come from the far reaches of the Pacific Ocean, from New Zealand, Fiji, Samoa, Hawaii, and from the indigenous Karuk tribe of Northern California. All of our panelists are dedicated practitioners with their sacred traditions and keepers of the ancient wisdom and guidance of their elders. And all of them have worked tirelessly for many years to preserve, protect, and perpetuate their cultural heritage. Each of these experts brings to this discussion a wealth of experience and knowledge in various contemporary disciplines, including science, government, education, business, and law. But more importantly, they bring their heartfelt cultural activism, personal spiritual understanding, and deep reverence for their ancient traditions and sacred values, and a profound love for their lands, traditions, and peoples. Papalii, Dr. Failautusi Avegalio Jr. It is my pleasure to welcome our first speaker, who is the director of the Pacific Business Center, University of Hawaii. He is from Samoa, and a Polynesian alii, or ranking chief, and holds the traditional title of Papalii as a senior heir to one of the oldest traditional titles in Polynesia. He is an advocate for holistic and systems-based regenerative development that weaves traditional wisdom, cultural values, and spiritualism with modern science, knowledge, and technologies. Dr. Tutsi, you now have the floor.
Malol soifu maua malelangi mama. Greetings from Hawaii, from the Pacific, and from me. I'm like to extend my grateful appreciation for being included in the panel and an opportunity to share some of my thoughts, my spiritual orientations, and my cultural foundations. I was very impressed with reviewing the literature of this organization and the things that they hold most dear. Among them, peace and civil disobedience in a peaceful and in a non-violent manner. And I think something that's very dear to my heart is the word healing, particularly healing the earth. Peace in the Samoan religious tradition equates to harmony. And a peace that has these four harmonies combined is the foundation of endurance and sustainability. And these four is harmony with the cosmos, harmony with the environment, harmony with one's fellow man, and harmony with oneself. I have been weaned through my formal education by the giants of this spirit. They include Mandela, Sister Teresa, Martin Luther King, amazing giants, but I'm reminded also that we also have giants from Oceania. From Aotearoa, we have the Nunuku, Wehenua. He had advocated nonviolence, and this is way back in the 1500s. We have a queen who also advocated, instead of engaging in settling issues with conflict and violence, she directed another direction by cultivating healing and peace. And then we recently, in the 1920s, or the 1930s, We have one of our leaders as the founder of the nation of Samoa, Tupua Tamasese Lealofi III. He was killed by a sniper during a peaceful march in Apia, Samoa. What is interesting is that though he was mortally wounded, he was able to advise his people that his blood was sufficient to shed for Samoa and to not avenge it. For him to do that to a warrior people and for them to comply is a magnificent example of that form of leadership. Gandhi, we credit much with, and I hold him as one of my great leaders. But the spirit that preceded much of what he has done, and in fact combines all that we know, comes from that simple word, peace, harmony. And in that sense, I would like to point out that there is a lesson to learn here as we review these great contributions. One of the most difficult things to understand is there's a difference between healing and curing. Oftentimes we see curing when the real need is healing. The difference is curing is removing all evidence of the disease. Healing means to make whole again. So in a way you can heal and not be cured, or you can be cured but not be healed. Healing brings its holistic, it's your heart, your soul, your body. So that you've been injured by an enemy, you right away, you want revenge. That's often the result of curing. Is some form of retaliation or some form of reaction. Where healing takes it to a much higher level. To heal, to realign your heart to your soul, to everything else that's associated with bringing harmony to life. Because the fundamental gift that these great people have contributed to us is to learn to live in balance and in harmony and ultimately peace. The earth is of particular significance to Samoans and Pacific Islanders, Polynesians in particular. Look to your language, look to your myths, look to your stories. In Samoa, the word for land is whanua. The word for dirt and mud is palapala or ele. The word for rock is ma'a. Interestingly enough, the ancient definitions are what is telling. Whanua also means afterbirth or placenta. Palapala and ele in the ancient terminology is not blood and dirt, it is blood. And the word for ma'a is not stone, as we know today, but it means heart. So even in our language of our creations, it defines a relationship between us and the earth. When a Samoan was born, I know in my case, the placenta is wrapped in a tea leaf and then it's buried into the ground. It's a metaphor that is so compelling, I didn't understand at the time, but I deeply embrace and understand it today. It means that you have two mothers. You have your birth mother, and by the ritual of bearing your placenta to the earth, you now have an earth mother. And it's your responsibility to care for both, to see to their health, to see their beauty, to see to their joy and happiness. To this day, I have difficulty watching somebody cut down a tree or a development where they start moving mountains away in hills, because I can feel they are tampering with something that I'm connected with. And until you feel that sense of connectivity, that these are your kin, your ohana, your family, it would be easy to ignore the fact that it would be easy to ignore the destruction that's happening all around you. By understanding the metaphor, you can actually, if you can't hear it, you can feel the pain. And what is most important is that your eyes can see it. Those are your family. When fish are bubbling up dead in the water, when the trees are poisoned because of chemicals, when the soil is completely loaded with chemicals and acids, until we reawaken our sense of connectivity, our sense of relationship, our sense of family with the earth, then we may follow the road of Aristotle. If you remember in Metamorphosis by Ovid, Aristotle cut down a sacred tree. And this sacred tree happened to be part of under the umbrella of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and land. Well, he was cursed with an insatiable hunger. So what happened? He turned all of his wealth into food, so he ate it until he ran out of food, and then he ate everything he had that he could, and it included his family. And ultimately, in a final feast, he devoured himself. We need to avoid that final feast by looking at those things that are sacred and that are essential to harmony, to balance, and to lead with aloha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tusi. And we really appreciate your sharing your traditions, wisdom with us today. We will explore that more deeply when we go into the question and answer period. Our next presenter is Dr. Manulani Aluli Meyer, who is an Associate Specialist of Student Affairs at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu campus. She works in the field of Indigenous epistemology and its role in worldwide awakening, cultural revitalization, food sovereignty, and a host of other issues of justice for the Hawaiian people. She will begin her presentation by showing a video which briefly describes a portion of her important work. Let's play the video, please.
People who are versed in ancient well-being systems need to be called forward. If I could summarize Indigenous epistemology in one sentence, it's serve land, love people. Here on Oahu, there's no coconuts here. They've all been taken off. And when you don't have coconuts hanging on coconut trees, you cannot have a relationship with the tree of life. We envision you as a relationship rooted in community and aloha aina. Because when you love land, you are paying attention to how land has always loved you. Today, we planted 108 coconuts. We planted friendships and we planted continuity. These trees are going to give food for the next 100 years. Our native knowledge system has been recovering in the last, 50 years, since our cousins are beginning to know each other, support each other, sail to each other's islands and be welcomed. And in that welcome, we revive our cultural practices. We are bringing forward the pono, the consistency of our transspatial realities. And my work is in the efficacy of aloha. It is the undeniable source of all values. Hahai no ka'ua I ka ulu la'au. Plant a forest and the rains will come. Share purpose with others and your life will have meaning. Serve land, love people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Dr. Tusi, for that clear connection, and to the vitality of what aloha means and what peace means to all of us. That was a beautiful mo'olelo. And Audrey, your general summary of what we believe in just made me cry. So thank you for your clarity, and thank you for summing me up, and summing the work that we are encouraged to do for the rest of our lives in a way that is inspiring to me and my family. So thank you for your clarity. It's an honor to be here to talk about ALOHA, a little aloha in our day. Spread a little aloha around the world. Right, thanks, Dr. Tusi, totally. Did you like the coconuts? Yeah, I think it's all about, as a philosopher, practitioner, I've gone from speaking about it to actually doing my very tippy-toe best to embody what loving really means. And so because I have Upolu as a friend, he's tasked me to think about what it means to actually be animated, to discuss the clarity, the verb, the purpose of what aloha is. And darn it, Upolu, if you haven't pressed me to actually feel that it is our spirituality, it is our mana moana spirituality, because when you love, when you're in the capacity of aloha, and aloha, by the way, isn't our philosophy, isn't our religion, it's our culture. You know what I mean? It's our culture, and when you have that as your not one of your values, as the genesis of all of your values, everything changes. It gets simple. It gets simple. Aloha is the generative source of our collective emergence, period. And so many people have said that. So many brilliant, beautiful, loving, enlightened people. And so it's just not Hawaiians. Don't mean to be, the hog cheese with you Samoans and native peoples and Maoris. Hello, we are here to be of service to a collective awakening. Just like Dr. Tusi says, it is our sense of connectivity. And that's why now, Audrey, and this is why the gang did that video, because we are so on fire with food security. We are so on fire of reminding our continental cousins, Uncle Christopher, I look forward to hearing from you, is that we have food growing in all of our trees. We eat from trees. We are in the tropics. So our food does grow in trees. And one of the best trees is the niu, is our coconut. It is our kumu niu. It is our beloved coconut that has been relegated to be described as an ornamental here in Hawaii, and worse, a liability. People are actually afraid of the coconut here. Dr. Tusi, you've seen that. No coconuts in Waikiki. So unbelievable. You must have been shocked. So we are working to no longer be oppressed by a colonial expectation of uniformity, but to awaken with aloha as our guiding spirit, and pono. So pono is our synonym for truth. You can't have aloha without truth. You can't have truth without aloha. Both are simultaneously an expressive and powerful element of our Pacific Island cousins. And that is that's what I'm learning by planting food again and giving out food, planting coconuts and giving out coconuts, healthy coconuts. We're up to about 100 different varieties. And this is from a group of people that said, what? There's different coconuts in the coconut trees. So there's a lot to recover. And so hahai no ka'ua, plant a forest and the rains will come, but the noahuna The deeper esoteric meaning of that olelo no ea, of that proverb, is share purpose with others and live a life of meaning. So thank you for this opportunity, gang. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer, for sharing your beautiful new now projects of love, aloha, on the islands of Oahu and Molokai in Hawaii. Our next presenter is Chris Peters. He is the president of Seventh Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples with more than 50 years of experience in grassroots community organizing. His work is focused on climate change, sacred sites protection, and the renaissance of sacred knowledge and earth renewal ceremonies of Northern California tribal peoples. Chris, you now have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. And I'm glad to be here and honored to be with this panel of distinguished people to talk about the issues of sharing the sacred values, religion and spirituality. I'm a Puhlik-lah, or Yurok, and Ner, which is a division of the Yurok tribe around here, and I'm Karuk Indian. My tribes have lived here in what is now called Northern California since the beginning of time. And we refer to that as Nathekan, before time was created, a time before time, when there was no time. We are earth healing and earth renewing people. This is our primary purpose in life, is to heal and renew the earth. We are put here for no other reason. As Puhlik people, we have abided by these traditions and customs and lived in peaceful, harmonious lives within our homelands for tens and thousands of years, from this Nathekan time. I'm also president of the Seventh Generation Fund for Indigenous People. It's a 44-year organization. I've been with it for now 33 years. Seventh Generation Fund, we are founded upon the philosophical precept that's widely held by tribal nations throughout America, that in each of our deliberation, we consider the impact on the seventh generation to come, a precept that tells us how to live sustainably, and more importantly, how to be a good ancestor, and is germane for this conversation this morning or this afternoon, wherever you came from. I'm one of the owners of Seventh Generation, of Red Deer Consulting. It's housed within Red Deer Center. We are widely known among the traditional communities in Northern California for Indigenous thinking, creative, and being. And I'm also on the board of directors of the Academy, and enjoy our relationship over the years, and we'll look forward to many, many more. First of all, I need to give thanks to the Wiyot Nation, whose homelands where the Red Deer Center is located, with deepest respect for the traditional people who have talked to the spirits of this place for many, many years, who have performed earth healing and earth renewing ceremonies, and are directly responsible for the tempo, the rhythm, the pulse of this place. A feeling that has touched our souls, and a feeling that we have come to appreciate. I offer thanks to the ancestors of this place for allowing me to speak here, to be with you as today. Before I get started, I must refer to the recent, we are all survivors of the pandemic. And I think it's a very long and protracted illness. Many of our family members, our relatives, our friends are or were very sick, and many have died from this COVID-19. We have lost many tribal elders or wisdom keepers in our communities. In the last 2.5 years, 1 out of every 240 Indians have died from COVID-19. We have sheltered in place. We have sequestered for more than 2.5 years, and it's running. We sit and watch our close relatives get sick. Many have died from this trauma, pain, disaster that we've each come through. For the next 2, maybe 5 years, it's going to be an uphill battle for many of our communities. I know the Pacific Islanders have close statistics as ours, that many people have died. Many of our elders, our wisdom keepers have died, that we have to give time for grief. We have to give time for our mourning, if you will, for this period of time of great loss among many of our peoples. The native paradigm is significantly different than non-native paradigm. There, in our tribe of the Puhlik and Yurok people, there is not a single God. In fact, we are not monotheistic. Among native peoples, perhaps indigenous peoples of the world, the American understanding of the Christian God is often referred to an illegal alien. Came to our communities from the first boat people. For there are spirits here, and who we came from, who created us as human beings, who give us life, who breathe life, and has taught us many, many different things. We have redwood trees, Douglas fir, cedar trees that have been standing longer than the colonizer's God or the Christian institution or the colonizers themselves have been here. Take a second to imagine how many of those trees have lived and died before non-natives have arrived with their religious narrative, were brought to this land. The earth, Mother Earth, is our common mother, is a living, nurturing being. For thousands of years, approximately 90,000 years, Mother Earth has served as a moral constraint, restricting the actions of human behavior. We cannot rape our mother, dig into her for gold. We cannot mutilate her body, mining, logging, damming, destroying sacred places. As long as the earth was considered a living and sacred being, it was considered to be a breach of basic human ethic behavior to violate natural law, to carry out such destructive actions against her mother. Even in Christian theology, this would be considered a sin of moral proportions. Our paradigm and our understanding is very animistic, like many of you. And it defines our relationship with the world and all forms of life, the connectivity that was spoken of. It embraces natural systems, natural laws, and sets forth principles of how our human beings must live on earth. It teaches us respect, reverence, and a process of reciprocation that sustains rather than drains the natural systems and elements of the earth. It embodies the philosophy of giving back, a process that we all need to embrace. We need to give back to Mother Earth, to give her a rest. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your traditional wisdom with us, as well as your actions. Maui Solomon is a Moriori, a barrister with 30 years of legal experience specializing in Indigenous peoples' issues, treaty law, cultural and intellectual property rights, fisheries and land claims, and tribal development. He and his wife, Susan, are establishing a nursery to grow and plant 150,000 native trees on their family lands over the next 10 years, and also setting up a permaculture operation to grow nutrient-dense food using only natural materials. Maui Solomon, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Audrey. Kia oranga, aloha, talofa lava, bulavanaka, and greetings, everybody. It's a real honor and pleasure for me to be sharing this platform with my Indigenous brothers and sisters from our beautiful Pacific Islands, and also that very large Turtle Island to the northwest of Rekohu. My name is Maui Solomon, and I'm from my tribe is the Moriori people from Rekohu, which is a very remote and small island in the southwest Pacific. just 800 kilometres east of Aotearoa, New Zealand. My grandfather, Tame Horomona Rehi, or as he is better known, Tommy Solomon, when he passed away in 1933, the newspapers and history declared my people to be extinct, because my grandfather was regarded as the last known Moriori of full blood. Actually, although I'm Moriori, I've also got Maori whakapapa, I have Pakeha or European. I also say I'm a full-blooded Moriori, and people say, well, how can that be? Say, well, I'm Moriori and I'm full of blood. So it's not how much blood you have in your system, it's how you identify culturally and with your identity and with your heritage and with your ancestors. That's not to deny my other ancestors or these other heritages. But Moriori for over 100 years became an inconvenient truth in the history of our nation, because you know, our people suffered genocide, we suffered loss of life, land, language, our liberty. We were enslaved for a generation, and all this happened on the watch of the New Zealand Crown, or the government as we now know. And it's only really in the last 40 years that Moriori descendants, Moriori people have fought to revive and give rebirth to our culture, our identity, our karaki, our prayers, our rongo, our songs, our re, our language. And we've recently concluded a treaty settlement with the New Zealand government that was initially filed by my ancestors in July 1862. So that's how long we've been fighting to recover our identity and recognition of our status as a people. I want to talk briefly about the ancient Moriori Covenant of Peace that was established by our ancestors 600 years ago, could be 700. But our founding ancestors, Rongomai Whenua, which means peace on the sea, and Rongomai, peace on the land, and Rongomai Tere, peace on the sea. Originally, those ancestors came from Central Eastern Polynesia, probably around Tahiti, Rarotonga, in that area. So we have hokapapa or genealogical links to those tribes in the Pacific. And so we're all connected, we're all related. Originally, when our people first settled, we were a warrior people. There was a lot of killing and even cannibalism. But a chief and a spiritual leader, Nanuku Whenua, came amongst the people and declared with these words, Koro patu koro kei tangata me tapu tuake. Cease your fighting and lay down your weapons. From this day forward, there shall be no further taking of human life. Learn to live in peace and to share the resources of the land and the sea. And his injunction was, the day you disobey, may your bowels rot. And the people obeyed for many, many centuries. And despite their islands being invaded and colonized, firstly by Europeans and secondly by two Māori tribes from New Zealand, our ancestors upheld their covenant of peace and refused to fight and kill ever again. And that covenant has not been broken from that day till this. And so I pay my respects and I honour our ancestors from Rongomai Whenua right down to Nanuku Whenua, right through to our present generation of our people today. So we've spent the last 40 years, we had no land, we had no meeting place, we had no language, but we've upheld our culture and our philosophies and our values of living together in peace and sharing with those who came to these islands. We've maintained those customs, but we've also stood firm in our own mana, in our own identity, and we have bought back land, we've built a beautiful marae, we're starting to revive our language, our tāria Moriori. We employ over 14 people on these islands. So we're now back in the game. Just finally, I want to talk about this notion of rongo, because rongo to us is peace. Our ancestor, rongo mai whenua, rongo means peace. It also means, to us, it means music. It's a song, rongo. And it, importantly, rongo also means to listen. And you can't have something, the most important peaceful thing you can do is listen to another person. Really, truly listen, not only with your taringa, your ears, but your heart, and hear what that person or those people are saying. So our ancestors in these islands had discovered something quite special, and despite the greatest provocation they were ever to face, they held firm to this covenant of peace. They refused to break that covenant because they realized that to not only survive, but to thrive as people, we need to learn to live in peace. So I want to just end now and offer those thoughts of rongo, but also peace. There also needs to be justice and truth, and those things are all part of us learning to live together in peace, not only with one another, but as previous speakers have said, with Papatunu, our Earth Mother, and we must respect and heal her. And Susan and myself and my family are doing that now with our own land. We're replanting, we're recloaking the land in its beautiful purewai, its cloak of native trees that was removed by farming practices. We're bringing back the manu, the birds. We're planting the land again. So finally, lovely to see you all and to share this platform with such distinguished speakers. Mero in peace.
Thank you so much, Maui Solomon. And now we move to Reverend Dr. Upolu Vaai, who is a principal and professor of theology and ethics of the Pacific Theological College in Suva, Fiji. He works in the fields of theology and ethics, indigenous epistemologies and philosophies, climate justice and decolonialization, and how these shape a new Pacifica consciousness that is resilient, holistic, and ground up. He is also a member of many international educational institutions and organizations. Reverend Dr. Upolu Vaai.
Thank you, Audrey, and Pulavinaka and warm greetings from the Sunday morning in Suva, Fiji. I bring special greetings from my geckos and frogs and the birds just singing around my garden office this morning. So it's a special greetings, Sunday greetings from them as well. Thank you indeed for the opportunity, and Vinakava level, dear Pacifica cousins, for your great wisdom this morning. I've been taking notes and noting down the breadth of wisdom that you shared with us this morning. You know, Audrey, I always believe that as Pacific Islanders, we believe that in beginning was relationship. We were born into relationships. And this is where we need to reconstruct and decolonize the reading of the Bible as well, because even the Bible in Genesis 1, the creation story, tells us that the world came forth from the womb of the waters. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters as a midwife to make possible this birthing of the world. Therefore, water, or fongatai, is the genesis of life, according to the creation story. We are deeply connected to water. This resists the false notion of alienation and separation from the earth that has unfortunately shaped the scientific and development narratives under the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, normally breached by the church. Relationality is the most sacred primordial form of knowledge. Though older than us, it is in us, around us, above us, under us, and for us. This is why for many Pacific Islanders, we are relational-centered thinkers. More importantly, we are earth-centered thinkers, as our brothers and sisters are referred to this morning. In many countries in the Pacific, values are created around the principle of relationality, to safeguard the protection and enhancing of ecological relationships. In Fiji, it is called Vewekani. In Tuvalu, it is Vafisokotaki. In New Caledonia, it is Talapa. In Tonga, it is Tauhiva. And to name a few, you name it. Relationality means that we cannot be humans alone. We are never alone when we were born. Everything around us shows that we are independent only in our interdependence. We are individuals only in our relations. We are liberated only in our aloha, our alofa, as my sister Manulani will always remind me, our alofa, our loloma. Our point of departure is not the I, but rather the we are, the tato. It doesn't mean that the I is not important. No, it is secondary, as we don't think in such chronological structure. Rather, it means that the I is constituted by multiple relationships. Therefore, the I is always a we. Everything that constitutes the I is from the we. In that sense, both the I and the we are important. I live in a house that is shared. I eat fish that I did not fish, that I did not feed. I live in a land that has ancestral footprints. I carry the blood that belongs to my mother, so I only hold it in trust. My pute is not just a belly button. It is a window of immeasurable connection to the earth. My umbilical cord, as was referred to before, buried in the earth through a ritual, reminds me of what I'm made of: soil, dust, rivers, ocean. My culture is a library of ancestral memories. My language is a storehouse of ecological well-being. When we say alofa, aloha, or loloma in Fiji, we're not just saying it for the sake of speech. We are in fact entering into a house of relationship, a world of sharing, a culture of gratitude and gifting. That small word, kololoma or alofa, is itself a world of inestimable relationship. It takes a pandemic to reintroduce us to loloma. The I and the we cannot be separated. Our lives flow into each other and out of each other, just like day and night flow into each other without tension and hostility. This is why the notion of individual ownership is not only problematic, it is also capitalistic through and through, because we don't own things. In relationality, we think relatives, we think kinship, we think connection. The environment is not an object we own. We are the earth. Therefore, we steward and share things. We don't own things. Relationality as a differently shaped worldview leads us to a differently shaped spirituality. Relationality requires us of self-emptiness, where we suspend our ego to live and understand the world through relationship lens. It requires shifting from the notion of stewardship that is only about caring for to the notion of deep living connection. We cannot honestly care for the earth if we are not deeply connected to it. We must always learn to love and connect to the land and people first, so that we know the worth of what we are fighting for. In relationality, our base is aligned to the speed of communities. Our understanding of economy immediately shifts from money to sharing. Relationality requires us to see unlimited worth in others. It is a living life through them. Let me just end here by saying that relationality is revolutionary. It is knowledge from the ground. It is wisdom from the communities. But any revolution must lead to evolution. Manulani taught me that. Revolution begins with the realization of who we are. Evolution starts with knowing our responsibility. Revolution must always be understood in the light of evolution, or else we destroy everything without rebuilding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Upolu Vaai, for sharing your wisdom with us. Now we're going to move to our question and answer period so that we can deepen the conversation of the presenters. And I'll be asking a series of questions of each of the presenters so that we can hear more deeply some of your wisdom and points of view. So I'll begin with Papalii, Dr. Tutsi. And I would like to know if you can give an example of the saying in your culture that says, good leaders lead and great leaders heal. Can you give an example of that for us so we can understand better the distinction that you try to make between healing and curing, and now with respect to the issue of leadership?
Well, at the University of Hawaii, I deal a lot with executive leadership, corporate leadership, community leadership. And so much of the information that comes in there comes from a different perspective. When in charge, take charge, etc. But what I bring to these lectures is a different concept. And this is originated from, again, I quoted earlier, Salamasina, one and only queens of Samoa. So what she taught was so fundamental and has implications that have been enduring to the present. And that is, and I've encapsulated and used it in all my lectures, is that good leaders lead, but great leaders heal. If you look at it, you can cure your little hates, your little angers. But it wouldn't, and you can, if you're looking at curing, you're just looking at removing the causes. But when you take it to a higher level of healing, you're now talking aloha. And it's very fundamental to Polynesia and much of Oceania that without aloha, you cannot heal. And that is healing the earth. We're so busy trying to cure problems that we forget to heal ourselves and each other. And only when that can happen, that we have a more holistic approach and a more enduring impact that can make the difference between existing and living.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, we'd like to come back to you with further questions, but let me move at this point in time to Dr. Meyer. Dr. Meyer, I was very intrigued with your project, New Now, about the coconut trees and, helping it to create food sovereignty for the people of Hawaii. Can you explain to us further what the coconut means to Hawaii?
Well, the niu is considered the tree of life in many parts of Polynesia because of its dynamic ability to give and give and give. It's the ultimate kupuna for us because this kumuniu gives everything. And it's the only tree in the world that you can eat every version of its fruit, every stage of its fruit. And the waters and the milk and the cream and the vinegar and the alcohol and the sugar and the pahus and the ihes and the o'os and the heart and the lau and the rope and it is the function. So it develops what Upolu is saying and what everyone is saying. Relationality. I love that, Upolu. Relationality is the most sacred and ancient form of knowledge. And with the coconut, with the niu, you actually begin to understand what that means. To have that relationship with the niu for 100 years, you've got the ability to serve you, your children, your grandchildren, and your grandchildren's grandchildren. And so that linkage of continuity really is through relationality. I think that sums it up, Upolu. You've summed it up so beautifully, that relationality is that energetic on switch. And we can't turn that on switch by just keep saying, love land, serve people. We've got to give people opportunities to do that. And so the Niu Now project, the Ulu Niu project, are putting coconut groves in people's backyards and gorilla planting coconuts everywhere. People go, what are you doing? I'm like, you're interested? Do you want to develop a relationship with something besides the television? So yes, they're interested. This society is diseased, and I don't want to get into it. I just want to develop solutions. And when you have aloha, as Dr. Tusi is saying, when you have aloha as in the ingredient of the solution set, you're in the process of healing. You're not just curing, you're healing. And so the coconut for us is a healing element of our collective evolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to ask Chris Peters, can you discuss this philosophy or the spiritual concepts that has inspired the earth healing and earth renewal ceremonies of your people?
Great. Thank you, Audrey. I think we have two ceremonies, the Sriracha Piawai, which I was pleased to wear the pink for 15 years, and the Wela Wela Ga, a jump dance ceremony, which I am principally in charge of in our communities. Both of those, the jump dance is an earth healing ceremony. It's a 10-day long actual ceremony. It's probably 40 days long of preparation and follow-up. We dance in a line. We raise up what is sacred, and we put down all that is bad, all that is evil. And that way, we establish some balance, some unity, some balance within the earth and in human beings. The Sriracha Piawai, we outline a process in that 10-day ceremony that looks toward the future, that we recreate the earth every year, that we create it and we walk through a thin veil into the new world. And that world renewal ceremony, we used to think, well, geez, we're pretty important having a world renewal ceremony. That's everybody's responsibility. Every human being has a responsibility for healing the earth and renewing the spirit of the earth on an ongoing basis. That was the focus of our religious freedom campaign in 1990s, and a litigation that we lost at the Supreme Court. It impacts every tribal people in the United States and throughout the world. It impacts each of your communities, that you cannot go on federal land, state land, or non-tribal land and achieve a religious understanding. It's an important litigation. It still stands today. It's called the Ling case. Please review it, look at it. And our campaign failed. Immediately following was the volcano in Hawaii. And it went down. Mini Braids was also, and about 46 major sacred site places in the United States was adversely impacted by the decision. We were fortunate enough to get some legislation that protected the areas. It depends logging and logging road development. And an important part of it is spirituality versus religion. Within spirituality, we understand that we achieve a revelation, if you will, an understanding of how things put together through a process that we do medicine making in the mountains. Religion relies upon the belief that something happened 2,000 years ago, that somebody had a revelation, and they put it in a book and they continue it. With spirituality that many of us have is an ongoing process that we achieve an understanding.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now I'd like to move on to Maui Solomon. So can you share, Mr. Solomon, why do you think that the Moriori people, their history and identity, was so suppressed and misrepresented in your country for all those many, many years?
Well, Audrey, after my grandfather died in 1933, some Pakeha historians or European historians created this myth that Moriori had settled Aotearoa, New Zealand prior to the coming of the Māori. And then Māori, supposedly, according to the myth, came and displaced Moriori, and my ancestors, the survivors, sought refuge on Rekohu, which is now known as Chatham Islands. So Māori came and pushed Moriori out of New Zealand, according to the myth. Now, that became taught in schools in New Zealand and it became a very powerful tool to justify colonization by English and Europeans of Māori and them taking Māori land, because according to the myth, well, Pakeha were just doing to Māori what Māori had supposedly done to Moriori. And that was actually taught in schools, and people today still believe that, many of the older generation, because that's what they were taught. And the atrocities that actually happened to my people here on Rekohu were conveniently swept under the carpet, and we became an inconvenient truth and stain actually on the history of this nation. So that's really why Moriori had been forgotten about and ignored and suppressed. And it's only through adhering to our own culture and sense of self-worth. And for myself, I started on this hikoi, on this journey when I was about 23. I'll be 62 this year, so it's been a little while. You can tell by the white in my beard. Well, I call those my albatross feathers. I looked at, what history had been teaching about my people, that we were weak, that we were inferior because we refused to fight, and so on and so forth, that we were virtually subhumans. And then I looked at actually who my people were. It had been a warrior people who had made a conscious decision to abandon warfare and killing and never to go there again, and then faced with an invasion of their islands and the killing and enslavement of their people, still adhered to that covenant. I thought that takes courage, that takes commitment. They're not a weak people to do that. In fact, it takes more strength to respond in a peaceful manner than it does with violence. It's easy to be violent, it's easy to be conflictual, but actually to act in a peaceful way takes strength and character.
Thank you so much, Maui, for sharing with us more deeply about your history, the Moriori people. And now to Reverend Dr. Upolu Vaai. Now, most of your work focuses around the philosophy and theology of Pacifica relationality, as you have so clearly expressed in your presentation. But can you explore more of why relationality is key to changing the development story in the Pacifica communities?
I think that the crisis that we face today in the development narrative derives from a dysfunctional understanding of a person, of a self. We have lost earth-centered thinking. In the church, we've emphasized redemption-centered thinking that is anthropocentric and always excludes the earth. Any law, any policies, or any economic model that sidesteps relationality, the idea of we-ness, the communities, the importance of deep ecological connection is not only selfish and controlling, it is theft in the truest sense of the word. Rich corporations don't think relationships. They only think benefits, profit, growth, extraction, competition. Our development story needs to change. it needs to incorporate the values and spirituality of the people that should underpin any communities-based development. So, for example, there's a great video that Manulani introduced to us that Niu is not just a tree. In our stories, Niu is a relationship. So, for example, in Samoa, Niu is the reincarnation of the tuna, the eel, in our traditional story. But the challenge is that we need to codify and translate these values to inform the mainstream narrative. And we need to strengthen an environment and a platform for this translation to happen. Because sometimes we talk more about the development narratives and the changing of policies. And then on the other hand, we talk about spirituality, but we need to build the bridge. That link, it's very important. How communities have intergenerational resilience and adaptation when it comes to climate change, for example. So we need to recognize the importance of relational communities-based knowledge and practices that prioritize responsibilities rather than entitlements. But this is not to say that we must return to the Stone Age. No, that's not what we are saying today. But rather we are saying that these values, whether it's aloha or whatever values that all of us are speaking about today, such as relationality, are critical in reimagining an old, new consciousness to confidently create new cultures and new worlds.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Upolu Vaai. Now I'd like to return to Papalii, Dr. Tutsi. Now, you have given an explanation of the difference between curing and healing. And you spoke about healing taking us to higher levels to make us whole, and not just to remove the disease. I would like for you to explain more deeply this distinction between curing and healing, and how, when we focus on healing, it actually helps us to shift our focus to the higher realms of the unity of the wholeness of our consciousness and all of life.
Thank you. Really, I'm deeply moved and appreciate the sharing and the comments by the very outstanding panel. Because I'm from the business school, we take a real strong look at the fiscal economic aspects of development, and so if it's from that context that as I work throughout the region and work with in different cultures, that I realized that many of the problems that they see needs curing as they see it. So curing in many instances is more focused on solutions that are rooted in money, in some form of material wealth. So, we got a problem, we need a grant, we need funding, etc., so we can solve or cure the problem. What that leads to is a economic development model that has been, it's global. That model is extractive, takes out the energies of the universe, of the earth, and what it does, it leaves behind a degenerated environment. Once its extraction is complete, it moves to the next area and extracts again, and the area degenerates and continues on and on and on, to now we have a situation now that is alarming. Wisdom. But then on the other hand is, as people talk about let's cure with money, well, what I like to think I can share from my world, from the indigenous world, is you may think money can cure, but the wisdom of our dimension is that aloha can heal. So if we look at that as the basis of your model, then we're looking at restorative model of development that are regenerative, not degenerative. And when we use that shift in our thinking, that makes all the difference in the world. We need to do as much these kinds of panels and share it with more young people, because what is happening in many of our schools and institutions is knowledge is outrunning wisdom. We need to bring wisdom to catch up with knowledge by engaging our younger generations and sharing and helping to guide them. Otherwise, they're subject to what they learn in the schools. And as Maui pointed out, not everything in history is what you think it is.
Thank you very, very much for that. And of course, we will have a recording of this panel, which you should feel free to share freely with your students and colleagues, friends, and all the young people that you know. So this wisdom can be passed on to younger generations. So thank you so much. And now, Dr. Meyer, I'd like you to share with us some of the proverbs of this entire cultural agroforestry movement that you have started to create in Hawaii.
Thank you, Audrey, for that question. I just want to just say, Dr. Tusi, that was fabulous. Money cures, aloha heals. That was just brilliant. Yesterday, I was in a meeting where they were trying, there was only 4 of us in this meeting, and we're going for $100 million. And I tagged out. I said, we don't need money. We need better relationality. So I should have said that, money cures, aloha heals. Because the ololo no ea, the proverbs that was the question, when you go deep into our ancestral memory, and I love that, Upolu, my culture is a library of ancestral memories. Absolutely. So as we bring the common sense, see, Indigenous people think indigeneity is basically a word of racial distinction. It's no longer the case. Indigeneity is a discussion of values, principles, and actions that are synonymous with continuity. So continuity and indigeneity, same. So if we're going to continue to live on this beautiful planet, we're going to renew our ancient understanding to our proverbs. One of my favorite ones is Uluae Kevalina a Ke Aloha. And that is, loving is the practice of an awake mind. Isn't that beautiful? Loving is the practice of an awake mind. I bounced that in my heart for so many years. And, if you're not congruent with that idea, you're not in the process of healing. You're in the process of curing. And that is the short term. It's not continuity. Another favorite ololo no ea proverb is hahai no ka ua I ka ulu la'au. Plant a forest and the rains will come. And I can say this over and over because it's the truth of life. And it really speaks of relationality that you speak of, Upolu. And that is, plant a forest and the rains will come. It really means share purpose with others and live a life of meaning. And so when you dial in the distinction between religion and spirituality, you will understand that one is the bureaucracy of the other. And so I'm no longer frustrated with the Christ message. He said the same thing different than our elders. As you sow, so shall you reap. Hahai no ka ua I ka ulu la'au. We're saying the same thing differently. And that holistic understanding has become a hologram for me. So I got to make it simpler, but I'm trying to make it simple, love land, serve people. That's Ea Hawaii. That is the proverb of choice. Ea Hawaii. People think Ea means sovereignty. It actually means freedom. And, when we're practicing freedom, there's aloha at our core. And because aloha is our absolute divine essence of how we're going to continue to mobilize and to evolutionize this notion of simultaneity. So when I do my last 2 minutes, I'm going to really summarize this whole event, because as you sow, so shall you reap. Such a great idea. The Buddha said the same thing differently. Paticca samuppada, dependent co-arising. It's a kako thing. It's a kako thing. It has always been a kako thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And now to Chris Peters. I'd like you to share more deeply some of the important aspects of the ceremonies in your community. And could you talk about the regalia and the processes of those ceremonies?
Yes, I'd be glad to. The first ceremony that we do, well, we have many ceremonies, not as significant as the one I mentioned, but the two basic world or earth healing and earth renewing ceremonies. Let me address those issues first. We have an earth healing ceremony that, again, it's a 10-day process of, well, it's about a 40-day process. The first of which is journeying to the sacred places, Dr. Rock, Chimney Rock, PK, Little Medicine Mountain, all of which were the subject of the litigation that I mentioned, the Ling case. And it is central and indispensable to the continuity of our thought process, our philosophy, our spiritual being. And we journeyed there to get the power of the medicine to perform these earth healing ceremonies. And we bring it back, and we're doing that process of medicine making in the mountains. We stand and we jump. We talk to the fire. And I used to say we pray, but pray kind of conjures up a Christian means of supplication. And it just came into our vernacular maybe about 2 generations ago. So, we try not to say prayer. And I've used a lot of Christian concepts in the past, but and I probably will again in the future. But and sometimes it's the only common way of understanding of this process. We jump and we sing, and we think it's a continuously driven thought. For 10 days, we think of nothing about the ceremony that we're going to do. It's dedication and persistence. And we bring that back to the communities. And with the jump dance ceremonies, there's 2 of them. And there's actually more than that, but 2 of them have come back really strong. The one that I'm involved with, we come from the village of Apiowe. And Apiowe is Srach Apiowe, and Apiowe is referencing to these ceremonies. We have an obligation to do that. So we dance in line. We have huge woodpecker head rolls, a sign of enlightenment, if you will, that we wear. It's like no other ceremony, the feathers or whatever. It's all woodpecker red. And there's not many of them left because the habitat has been destroyed. In Srach Apiowe, or the deerskin dance, we dance with albino deer. We understand that they have been to the other side, and they've come back to show us the way. And we hold them up and we dance them, and they cut through the veil and put us through to the other side, the new world, the new life, the renewal of ceremony. And I wish I had more time, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And let's ask now Maui Solomon, if you could share the hopes and aspirations of your people today, the Moriori people.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. I've been so inspired by listening to my friends and colleagues about the notions of regeneration, connectivity, and this whole concept of connecting with one another and with our Mother Earth. I'd like to really focus my my response around that, which is also consistent with the hopes and dreams of my people. And so one of our deities, our ancestors, was named Rangitokona. And Rangitokona was the deity who separated the primordial parents, Papatūnuku, the Earth Mother, from Ranginui, the Sky Father. And he did that by placing 10 pillars between those parents to allow light and love come into the world. And that was through his wife, Taumarama, the world of light. So between the male and the female energies, they brought life and love or aloha into the world. Now, when Rangitokona, he also created the first human by shaping out of earth, out of Papalii, the first human was created, and it was created in the shape of a tree. And he brought life, or the Mauri, the life force, entered that tree by rangitokona, taking the spirit of a bird and infusing it into that tree, and that brought the tree alive, and thus the first human was created. So when you understand that that is your pokapapa, that is your connection, that is your actually very creation, according to our stories and traditions, you have an inbuilt responsibility to look after Papatūnuku, to respect the trees, to respect the birds. And when you do that, you're respecting one another, that connectivity, that relational thing, because it's not just between humans, but it's right back to our primordial parents, the Earth Mother and the Sky Father. Mero.
Thank you so much. Now, Reverend Dr. Vaai, because you yourself are the president of a theological college, I wanted to ask, how would we use relationality to rethink and reframe education in the Pacific?
Thank you, Audrey. Education is key to changing the development story in the region. If we are really serious about changing the development story. But I think the education system has erred us from the beginning. Why do we always, for example, push this idea of formal and informal knowledge, or formal and informal education? We've been developing education around a profit-driven and employment-driven agenda of the capitalist economies. And as we do so, we incorporated at the same time the capitalistic and neoliberal values of growth, that we miss the ecological and relational values of life. While jobs are important, there are key values that we cannot compromise. That is aloha, loloma is one of them. We need to reconscientize our minds to push for a values education system that recognizes cultures, spiritualities, loloma, aloha, and respect. That recognizes what education normally sidelines as informal knowledge or informal education. That informal knowledge belongs to our communities, but it was always formal. From centuries ago, it was always formal. It was always part of our spiritualities, part of our knowledge systems, until there was this binary split that was introduced because we wanted to make sure we incorporate a capitalistic, profit-driven kind of education. So education really holds the key, and I mean transformative education. Reawakening education that Manu was talking about holds the key to what Tusi was talking about, regenerative development and ecological well-being that Chris and Maui were referring to. I think for me as an educator, who's the leader of a regional theological institution and soon to be transitioning to a broader university that focuses on Indigenous knowledge. I'm moving the college towards that to make sure we focus on our values, on our spiritualities, on our philosophies, and how do we incorporate that and inform the development narrative. I think education, for me as an educator, is key to transforming, rethinking, and reframing that development narrative that we have suffered under, the extractive economics that we have suffered under. And then work with Manulani in terms of planting anew and planting other trees that are not available.
Thank you so much, Upolu. And I would like to, we have just been filled with so much wisdom here. that I wanted to have each of our presenters just very quickly, no more than 2 minutes apiece, give your conclusory comments that you would like our listeners to be able to take back with them about your presentation. So if we could start with Papalii, Dr. Tusi, please.
Mahalo. In keeping with Manulani's aloha with the coconut, let me share a wisdom. I think, and I absolutely agree with Upolu, there needs to be a transformation, especially in the transmission of information, knowledge, and in particular wisdom. It's called the tofa of the popo uaveke, the coconut that erupted. In Polynesia, the coconut represents not only survival and resilience, but also the wisdom of destruction and renewal. For a coconut to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, the husk rips apart, and everything inside comes out. To someone who doesn't understand the wisdom of growth, renewal, and birth, it would look like complete destruction. Life doesn't accommodate you. That's the lesson. It shatters you. Every seed destroys its container, or else there is no fruition. And it takes wisdom to understand this. And people, if we're going to look at helping people through a transformation, we must first assure them what it means, inspire them so that they have the courage to confront the dismantling of paradigms that have basically created psychic prisons in which they are imprisoned. So that when it happens in your life, the maturity and the renewal that comes up will enable you to stay the course. And the humility to accept the gift of renewal, and all this led by aloha.
Thank you so much. So beautiful. So now, Dr. Meyer, you have the floor.
That was fabulous, just fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, because wisdom doesn't have to catch up to knowledge. Wisdom is just steady. Wisdom steady, and things of quality have no fear of time. The transformation is already here. You know, when we said no to, I don't want to help get $100 million. And, you know, I said it with so much soft consideration, because I want 100 million friends, because that's what ku'us are. Ku'us are the knots in a net. That's what we call knots, ku'u. And ku'u is also beloved. How's that? So we want to activate Indra's net. We want to activate the ancient symbol of the flower of life. We want to activate Awamu Kuliana. It means collective transformation through individual excellence. And we do not get to collective transformation through individual excellence unless you know what it is. And a schooling system that is standardized, uniformed, timed, competitive does not do that for us. So I've stopped trying to change the schooling system, and now I'm going to education, because, you know, never let school interfere with your education, Mark Twain said, and I totally agree, because our education is in our communities. Our education is in my own experiences. And so this is why it's time to be very clear about the role relationality is. But as a post-quantum scientific poet person, it also describes the hidden matrix of life. And that is an energetic field. Awamo is a process of procreative potential that expands by its own goodness. So if we want to talk about higher frequencies, Audrey, higher levels of consciousness, we're talking about loving. And when we love, when we're in the service of loving, it expands by its own accord. And that's Paticca Samuppada. That is the hidden matrix of dependent core rising. That is the thing that relationality just absolutely animates in me. You know, hahai no ka ua I ka ulula ao. translated, it is about loving. It is about aloha. And we're not talking about religion. We're talking about spirit and spirituality. And spirituality is the grandmother of religion. And she's waiting to feed us all, because we are her progeny, all of us. Every single one in this webinar is part of what we're saying here. And we are all connecting when we get to know each other, and when we host each other, and when we feed each other, and when we know each other's children's names. So mahalo nui for this opportunity to meet new and old friends in this, Audrey. Thank you everyone for this opportunity to ho'oulu lahui, to animate each other, to each other, and for each other, and by each other. It's kako. Aloha mai. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer. And so, Chris Peters, if we could hear your conclusory remarks, we'd appreciate it. Your words of wisdom, please.
Well, thank you. It's difficult to follow this distinguished panel by all means, but at some point in August, there's a date and time along the narrative line that humanity reaches a point of consumption that supersedes Earth's ability to sustain herself. Each year, each calendar year, this date grows closer. We are after August, we are living on our grandkids' time. We've gotten things pretty messed up, you know, and I don't know how we can other than look at the signs. You know, the species of the earth are migrating north. There is no language in Canada for red robins or spiders or rattlesnakes or moose. You know, there is, the ice is melting. You know, we need to be aware of that. The ice is melting, you know, but there is still optimism. There is still time, hope for optimism and a renaissance of thought, or an important turning point that leads to social transformation has been discussed, that is now in progress. With the good minds of many people, such as yourselves on this panel, we need to envision or re-envision a paradigm that will equip humanity to collectively regrow a relationship with the earth. We are tasked with the responsibility of teaching our settler non-Indigenous peoples. We know the narrative of civilized man must be changed. People can see the narrative has a very bad ending. If not, the ecological challenges that we now face, global warming, contaminated oceans, the rise in topsoil, or the fresh water and potable water. Just look at the bad endings of Abrahamic theology, rupture, final conflict, Armageddon. This is not the narrative of Indigenous peoples. It really is not too late to think of a collective story, that we need a narrative that has a never-ending, a sustainable narrative that will go on forever and forever. There will be no Armageddon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris Peters. And now on to Maui Solomon, if you could share your final words of wisdom.
It's been both humbling and inspiring to listen to my brothers and sisters. And I'm reminded of a saying that comes from my brother Christopher, one of his people in America, Native Americans. I recall reading many, many years ago, the earth needs less takers and more caretakers. I'm not sure, I can't recall now who said that, but never a truer word was spoken. We need to be taking better care of one another, and especially our Earth Mother and Sky Father. One of the things I've said to my children when we've been out in on the whenua, on the land, planting trees, plant a tree is one of the most important things you can do in your life. Oh, why is that, Dad? Well, you plant that tree, you say a little blessing, a karaki, to ask for that tree to grow strong and healthy. It's a gift back to your mother, Papa Turnuk. And you get to see that tree growing throughout your life, and then your children will see it, and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and so on and so on. And that is a real gift that you're giving to yourself, to your huno, to your family, to Papatūnuku, and it's a great thing to do. So I've sat and I've listened with my taringa very carefully to these wise men and women, and I've thought that we have in today's modern world access to more knowledge online and social media than we've ever had in human history. But what we lack is the wisdom to go with that knowledge. And in this panel today, we've heard amazing wisdom. And I think myself that Indigenous people, Indigenous cultures, traditional cultures who still have that connectivity to Papatūnuku, to the Earth Mother, because that's where our wisdom comes from, the world needs to listen. We have a real gift to give to the Earth, but we need to use our taringas. We need to use rongo. We need to listen peacefully to that. Merungu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maui Solomon. And so now, Dr. Vaai, you have the final words.
Thank you, Audrey, and thank you very much, my fathers and mothers who are here. Listening to your wisdom really is an invitation for self-assessment and decolonization, in particular of my own mindset. Today, I've been invited to the world of healing, continuity, spirituality, the new awakening, regenerative development. What else? There's a deep wisdom in all of this, rooted in our life-affirming values. I just want to end with the Kiribati proverb, which says, "Eat a little and live a little." This eco-relational wisdom is symbolic of the importance of our cosmological and otherness, of always having others as part of our consciousness, always having the earth as part of our consciousness. It is a critique of this digestive monarchs and creators of digestive systems that promote another proverb, which is called eat all and leave nothing. We need to eat a little and live a little, rather than eating all and live nothing. This is the extractive issues that we are dealing with. I definitely see the importance, Audrey, of this forum and all other forums that talk about our Pasifika Ainga. We need to go back to the importance of our Pasifika Ainga, our regional family, our oceanic family. Perhaps the development narrative, they call it regionalism. I prefer to call it Ainga, because we've always been an Ainga way before regionalism came. And it's important to have this regional collective action and collective wisdom in order to protect the whole region, especially from the extractive economies that we are dealing with. So the values of Roloma, I think, should become part of a new regional architecture. And I'm hoping that we can talk to the Pacific Island Forum Secretary of how we can incorporate most of this in a 2050 strategy that countries and governments in the Pacific are looking forward to. But thank you very much. Thank you indeed for the wisdom.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our wonderful speakers for sharing the sacred values of the Pacific Islanders and Indigenous people. We are really fortunate indeed to have had our consciousness and awareness raised by people who are really helping us to remember our true connection to the land and the divine spirit that lives and moves through all of us. The challenges of Indigenous communities in contemporary times that arise out of their colonial histories is an inspiring story of faith activism. and perseverance. And it is a story of regeneration of ancient faith traditions that constantly honors the land and our connection to it. And all of our presenters today reminded us about our sacred connection to Mother Earth and the remembrance that a walk in nature walks our souls back home to the divine source of all there is. And again, our deepest appreciation to the Interfaith Ohana of Hawaii, our wonderful presenters and their respective organizations that are co-sponsoring this event, and to all of you today for joining us on this journey, the gift of aloha, the gift of love. Mahalo and aloha nui loa, everyone, until we meet again. Thank you. Bye-bye.